Hello, Gaston County. Welcome to episode number 149 of Gaston's Great, a podcast highlighting some of the great things happening in and around Gaston County. I'm your host, Stephen Long. We're coming to you once again from the worldwide headquarters of GSM Services right here in downtown Gastonia. We simply believe in discussing more of the reasons why Gaston's great. We're highlighting another great organization this week as we highlight Gaston Residential Services. We have Darlene Norton with us today. Darlene is the executive director of the organization. So, Darlene, it's great to have you on and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
All right, well, so like normal, we're going to get right to it. So before we get into the specifics of the organization, just if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about yourself, anything that you'd like to share.
Well, there's not too much to tell. I was born in California from a military family, so we traveled quite a bit.
Okay.
My dad's a Vietnam vet.
Oh, wow.
And he was last stationed at Cherry Point, North Carolina. And so when he retired, we ended up staying there. So I went through middle school, high school in Beaufort, North Carolina. Then I went to college at UNC in Chapel Hill.
That's unfortunate.
And then, no, that's great. It was great in the 80s. So went to school there. After I graduated, I did that sort of thing where I took a gap year. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. My plan was to go to graduate school, but I did have to get a job. So I actually answered an ad in the newspaper. You had to do that back in that day. And there was a place called Gaston Residential Services that was looking for something called live-in staff at a group home.
Okay.
Didn't really know what that was, but I thought I could do that. I lived in Salisbury at the time. So I answered the ad, came down here, never been to Gastonia, never heard of Gastonia, never heard of Gaston County before. Answered the ad, had an interview, and I became a staff at Gaston Residential Services. Well, my plan was to be there for a couple of years. And it's now 35 years later.
Wow, yeah.
And I'm currently the executive director.
All right, so yeah, it's interesting how our stories, the past sometimes isn't what we think, right?
Right.
Yeah,
I had no idea
I can,
this is what I was going to do.
Yeah, I can relate to that because, when I was younger, I was never going to work at GSM, ever. Here I am 32 years later. Okay. Yeah. And you mentioned Beaufort. Beaufort's a terrific place. Yeah. My wife and I had to spend some time there this past summer. So it's a lovely area of the state. So I appreciate that very much and appreciate your family's service as well.
Thank you.
So, remember, the point today is just to what can we learn about Gaston Residential Services. I think I mentioned this right before we started recording, but I've been here a long time. I've heard of Gaston Residential Services, but I personally don't know a lot about it. So, first of all, just tell us, what is the organization, the mission. I kind of like to go into that area of like the day in the life or the day in the week of Gaston Residential Services. So you kind of just start there if you don't mind. For our listeners?
Sure. Our mission is to support and empower people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So we serve adults from 18 to, I think our oldest is 78 right now.
Okay.
We did have a few people we served that were in their 80s, that lived to their 80s. And we provide supports and services and residences for them. Some of the supports we serve have to do with, providing personal care or assistance with any kind of needs they have throughout the day. We also provide supported employment and community activities for the people that we serve. So we started 50 years ago, actually.
Okay.
So we started back in 1975. A group of families got together and wanted to bring their family members home from the institutions. So they started a small organization called Gaston County Group Homes for the Handicapped back in 1975. They hired their first executive director, I think it was about 1977. That was Rita Thuet. Okay. And she was the executive director during my tenure there, and she stayed up until I took over as executive director in about 2018.
Okay. So only two executive directors.
Only two executive directors. So started out with serving just 2 or 3 people, and through the years developed more and more services and supports for individuals. Until today, we have 11 licensed group homes. We have 3 apartment programs, and we have our community program and supported employment program. So we have lots of programs, and all of them are in Gaston County. One of our group homes is in Cherryville. One is on the extreme other side of the county. We have one in Belmont, and then the rest of them are primarily in the Gastonia city area.
Okay. All right. So you covered a lot there.
Yeah.
So
Sorry.
That's no. That's great, because that gives me a really quick, broad, and our listeners a quick, broad overview of what I didn't know, and it's kind of the whole point here. So maybe can you describe, say, a day in the life of a typical resident or staff, or just things that y'all are doing, on a day-to-day basis? Maybe a little more detail. Does that make sense?
Sure. Most of our homes operate on a 3-shift schedule. So we have staff that come in at 6 a.m. and work until 2, and then other staff that come in from 2 to 10, and then overnight. Some of our homes, we have the needs of the people who live in the homes require that we have a staff that's awake all night and taking care of the people that we serve. Other of our homes, we just have staff that sleep over, that are there in case of emergency. And then we do have some of our apartment programs where the people don't require that much support. So we have staff that come in and out.
Understood.
So it's staffed very differently depending on what the needs of the people are. Our homes vary wildly from people who need total care. Some people who may be medically complex and need things like feeding tubes or other sort of treatment and care, all the way to people that we just check on a few times a week or help them pay their bills or make sure they get their groceries and those type of things. So we have a wide variety of services that we provide to people here in Gaston County.
All right, good. That's helpful. So during your short time at Gaston Residential Services, this can go all the way back to when you first became involved with the organization up until today. Does something stand out that you can think of an example where an individual, a family, or something where that you can remember that you really helped, or you realized, hey, that's really the mission. That's why this organization is here. Something that comes to mind? Oh yeah, there's several things that come to mind. I think that's one of the things, because this field, oftentimes people get burnt out in it because it's really hard providing care for people, especially the way that we do it, where people are very young and they can get very old. Now, I haven't aged in 35 years, but some of the people that we serve have. And unfortunately, that means that we have to go through, people passing away and losing members of our GRS family. What comes to mind is actually we served a person called Michael. And when he first came to us, he lived in one of our higher need level homes. He was a person who had spina bifida. He used a wheelchair. He had limited use of his hands. But he was so smart and so had such a go-get-'em attitude that he just really didn't want to be, restricted by anything. So we worked with him until he was eventually able to move into his own apartment. It took some work and some time to get him comfortable with that situation, to get him to learn how to transfer independently and do all the things he needed to do to be able to live on his own. But he got there, and eventually he lived by himself and was fiercely independent, would travel through the community by himself. The next thing he wanted to do was to get a job. So we had to work with him to figure out what is it that he could do to contribute back to the community, work in the community, and be part of the community. Eventually, through our supported employment, CMG, he was able to get a job at the movie theater. Okay.
And he tore tickets at the movie theater and took tickets there. And he worked there for about 17 years.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. And, it didn't really hit me, through the process of all the trials and tribulations through that process. But unfortunately, he did pass away. He became very ill and passed away. And it was amazing when he would go into the hospital, we'd be there visiting, and all of a sudden these people were, who are you? We couldn't figure out who these people were that were visiting him. It was people from the movie theater. Yeah. So he had built that community there. And then he actually was in the Gaston Gazette as a person of the year he passed away. And I think when I was reading that article, I was just like, this is just amazing. Right. This is just, the times you're feeling like you're stressed out and it's really difficult and stuff, you sit back and realize, he had a really good life. He made that life himself. We were just there to support it.
Right.
But just to be able to be a part of that was really incredibly important.
So this is a similar question, maybe in a broader sense. Is in your time, your 35 years, is there something that stands out as like you're most proud of accomplishing, or most proud of seeing happen, or maybe how the organization has evolved, or is there something that stands out for you?
So I mentioned that we have different levels of services.
Right.
We had started out with just group homes. And so those are licensed facilities. They're highly regulated. Typically, you have 5 to 6 people living in them and a number of staff supporting them. We really, through the leadership of Rita, our previous executive director, really wanted to move towards getting people into more independent settings. And so we started with moving people out into apartments in the community and providing the supports for that. And then that has grown over the years to us now having 3 apartment complexes in the community, and to really see people be able to transition from that high need level of care where it's really regulated and really there's not as much freedom or independence for people to those more independent settings where they can really kind of blossom and spread their wings, and to see how it changes a person. People who we may have called more difficult to work for just because they might have some issues regulating behavior or things like that. Those kind of things go away once they have that independence, and it's not always somebody telling them what to do 24 hours a day. So I think that's really something that I'm really proud of.
How many people are you currently clients, whatever you want to call them? How many people are?
So we have 83 people that we serve residentially throughout the group homes and apartments. We do have a few others that we don't serve residentially that we serve through our community programming.
Okay.
We really, just like everybody else, we really took a hit during COVID, with the supported employment especially. A lot of our staff and a lot of our people served jobs just went away. And so that's one of the things that we're really looking forward to rebuild is our supported employment. We are a VR vendor, and so we do take in people from outside of our residential program.
Okay, understood. Mm-hmm. How do people, individuals, families, how do they get connected with you? How do y'all find out about needs and vice versa?
Yeah, so we a lot of ours is word of mouth.
Okay.
So it's families of people that we serve or people that know us, know our services, will refer people to us. For our apartment program, we do have a waiting list on the Gaston Housing Authority. So if somebody who has IDD is interested in moving into an apartment, we do have 2 apartment complexes that work in conjunction with the Gaston Housing Authority to find the people to live there. So they will screen, take applications, and keep waiting lists for those services as well. Partners, our local entity, also may be a place for people to go to find out where there's residential services in the area. But a lot of it's word of mouth.
Okay, understood. So this is probably, you've probably already answered this question, but I'm going to answer it anyway. I mean, you've already shared why this is important. Yeah, I think there's probably most people like myself probably don't understand the need, because we're just not exposed to it every day like you are. I mean, I am a little bit because of involvement at United Way, my Rotary Club, and so I'm Community Foundation, so I'm maybe a little more familiar with some than some of the things that are going on in our community. But why would you say Gaston County in general is better and better off because of your organization and the services that you guys are providing?
So our slogan is making a good community better. It just happens to be that. So I've thought about that over the years. What does that really mean? How does Gaston Residential Services make a community better? And how do the people that we serve make the community better? And it really is just, I think it makes the community better having people with different abilities in and amongst community members, being members of churches, being members of local clubs, working in the community, and just being a part of the community. I mentioned Mike before. He was on the transportation board of Gaston County because of the sidewalk issue for him.
Sure.
And so he advocated
Different perspective than
very
most of us.
strongly for sidewalk cutouts so that he didn't have to drive down the middle of the street. And
Oh,
he
wow,
could
yeah.
safely navigate his community. We also have within our organization what we call our advisory council. So our advisory council is made up of people that we serve, and they meet at least once a month. And their role is to really advise us and tell us what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. But they also like to give back to the community. And so they do a backpack school drive every August for disadvantaged school kids. And they also take part in Samaritan's Purse. And they did like 43 shoe boxes this year. So they gather all the donations, put them all together, take them to the center, raise money for the price of postage and all that kind of stuff. So it's really important that they're just not taking and receiving people's goodwill, but they're also giving it back. So in that way, I think that we offer a great way to make this community better.
All right. Well, that's good. I appreciate that because, I mean, collectively, that is what makes our community a better place. Is the collective actions and how we interact with each other and what we're ultimately doing for the community as a whole. So this is that classic question we like to ask about looking ahead for the organization. The classic question is, what's the organization going to look like 5 to 10 years down the road? I know in our business at least, and I don't know, we don't really look that far ahead anymore because things change so quickly. But what, next 3 to 5 years, what do you see happening in the organization? Are there any big plans? Is it just continue what you're doing, or just what do you foresee going forward?
Okay. So this year, I guess it's shameless plug time. I mentioned that we're
absolutely.
celebrating our 50th anniversary this year. So really, we're going to take this year to celebrate, to kind of look back and look forward to what we can bring to Gaston County and to our services. So we're planning a couple of events this year. We do have a fundraiser coming up in May, on May 16th. And it is the 50th anniversary. We'd like to raise $50,000 for 50 years of service. And so that's coming up. And then we also have a picnic every year. So we're going to just try and figure out ways that we can do a bigger and better picnic to kind of celebrate. I was here when we celebrated our 25th anniversary, and we did a time capsule.
Oh.
So all of the homes and all the people that we served at that time, we have pictures and little things that they made. So we'll be pulling that out, reminiscing.
That's
and
cool.
maybe we'll do another time capsule this year. I don't know. But we've got to figure out what to do to celebrate. Looking ahead, I mentioned our apartment programs. We're just in the beginning processes of thinking about whether or not we want to build another small complex for people with disabilities.
Okay.
So very, very beginning stages of just talking about that. But I think probably in the next few years, we'd like to expand our services and serve even more people.
Okay.
Depending on the need, we can be flexible as far as who we serve and what type of people need the services the most.
Yeah, like so many groups and organizations here, you don't see that need going away, do you?
No.
Yeah.
It's one of those services where you kind of think, you wish there wasn't a need for it, even though it's, it's important and it's helpful to people for sure. But people are always probably going to need help. So we're happy to be there to help.
All right. Well, listen, I appreciate that, Darlene. Is there before we shift gears briefly, is there anything, before we finish, we'll make sure, you can share for our listeners where they can go find more information out. Mm-hmm. If somebody has a family member or something that, they're like, oh, wow, this organization could help our family, how they can get in touch with you guys, all that. We'll make sure we do that before we're finished. But is there anything I haven't asked that I should have asked before we shift gears here shortly?
No, I think you asked good questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. So as we always do with our guests here at Gaston's Great, we make them endure these Gaston County related questions. So we're going to call it this week the 50th anniversary speed round of questions. All right. Naomi, is that adequate naming? I name it something different every week. So Darlene, you've been here long enough to be able to answer these correctly and appropriately. So first question that we always ask is, what is your favorite Tony's ice cream flavor?
That's a tough one. I'm not an ice cream fan.
Well, we don't care. here at Gaston's Great?
I was pushed. I would say mint chocolate chip.
Mint chocolate chip.
But I really go there for the hot dogs.
Okay.
I have to be honest.
Well, you know what? I have to admit, I've eaten there. I've eaten more than ice cream there from Tony's before. How about Sundrop or Cheerwine?
Sundrop all the way.
Okay. How about favorite local restaurant?
That's a tough one too. I like local restaurants. It depends on what I'm going for, but I would have to say it's either Gia or probably Groovy Beast.
Okay,
Those are
yeah,
two of my favorites.
Two good choices. Now here we are, a super important question. I'm afraid I already know the answer. But I will ask anyway. UNC, Duke, or NC State?
Well, Duke. No, UNC, of course.
Wow, I can say you
UNC all the way.
Throwing a wrench in it there. Of course, we kid about that. But I'm an NC State guy, but I'm married to Tar Heels, so I kid around about the Tar Heels. And listen, we're lucky here in North Carolina. I have a lot of great educational institutions, and my 3 children will graduate. 2 of them already graduated, but 3 different states supported schools. So,
wow.
So again, we're very fortunate here in North Carolina. Darlene, what is something very few people know about you?
Probably that I don't like using the word afraid, but I don't like heights. I get vertigo if I'm even on a 2nd-story landing. So I really don't like heights.
So maybe not going to the top of Crowers Mountain and looking over the...
Correct.
Okay. Looking over down the rock, down the rock face. Would
not be a good day for me, no.
Not down the rock face.
No.
I think that's pretty common, frankly, for a lot of people. How about a book or blog or article or another podcast or something that you familiar with or think might be worth sharing for our listeners?
Well, so most of the things I have to read have to do with like policy and regulations. So I don't know in good consciousness if I could give that recommendation. The last book I read, I did read Hillbilly Elegy because it was topical.
Sure.
And I figured might as well read it.
Interesting.
And it was a really good book.
You know what? I have to admit, that's one I haven't read. Obviously, I heard a lot about it because I try to pay attention to at least
it was in the news
on.
For some reason. I'm not really sure what that was, but
well, we won't go there.
No, please.
So listen, I appreciate you indulging us on a few of these Gaston County related questions, even though your college answer was not correct. So listen, we get a few more questions and we'll finish this episode up. So you remember, this is a podcast we created just to talk about the reasons why Gaston County is such a great place. If you listen to any episodes, everyone knows I'm a big homer for Gaston County, being from here. But how would you answer this question? Besides Gaston Residential Services, why would you say Gaston County is such a great place?
I mean, I think there's the best of both worlds. You've got the rural areas, you've got the urban areas, you're close to Charlotte, you're close to the mountains, close to the beach, so you could pretty much do anything in a day. So that's one of the reasons I really like this area in Gaston County. And I think the sense of community too here in Gaston County is great. Accepting and being able to build relationships with different companies and other organizations and just being a good collaborative partnership and having those opportunities here.
Well, I appreciate it. And I agree. I think it's a very unique county. I've had the fortune to travel. Gone to college for a few years, and I don't know. I still like coming back here and being here. So, and
there are still. I mean, this county's so big. There's still times I'll drive through parts of the county. So I've never been here. I didn't know there was a river here. Where did that come from?
Absolutely.
So it's very unique.
All right, last question for you, and this is, I think I say this every episode. I think it's my favorite question. But Darlene, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Don't be afraid, or those things that you're afraid of, go ahead and do them. I mentioned I was afraid of heights earlier, but I did had the opportunity to travel to Australia. I just wanted to go to the furthest place I could think of. So I went to Australia a few years ago, and I actually did the bridge climb in Sydney.
Oh, wow.
I didn't particularly enjoy it, but I did it anyway because I wanted to be able to say I did it. Yeah. So I did it. So that would be what I would tell myself.
Yeah, the things that...
Do the things you're afraid of.
I know when I was younger, there were things that I was afraid of that looking back now, like, why?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, that perspective, how that changes, and just, I don't know, things that seemed important then just weren't in the big picture. So, Darlene, I greatly appreciate that. And This has been really good. So obviously, remember the main point here is to bring awareness to your organization. So where can listeners go to learn more, to reach out and contact the organization, or just share anything and everything you'd like to share there?
Sure. We have a website. It's www.grsinc.org.
Okay.
And you can find most anything on that website. We have information on our fundraiser coming up. We have information on our organization. There's applications for services. You can contact us for that. We have job applications there if anybody's looking for a job. We employ about 135 people.
Oh, wow.
We're as most people in our industry, chronically underemployed, but we're doing pretty well now, but we'll always take applications. And so that website is a great place to go.
Okay. Any social media?
We are on Facebook.
Okay.
Gaston Residential Services.
Great. All right. Well, listen, I appreciate that. So maybe there'll be a listener who's touched, or maybe a listener who has a family member or something that somebody might be struggling with something. And that's one of the whole points of doing this week to week, is that we want to bring awareness to organizations and maybe an organization that somebody's not familiar with, as I was today. So I appreciate that very much. I'm going to finish up with my own book recommendation and thought for the week, like I typically do. And I think I've shared maybe one book of this gentleman's before today, but Donald Miller is somebody I follow, and he wrote a book. This is actually, it's not old, but for some of the books I recommend, it might be. I think he wrote this in 2008, 2009, called A Million Miles in 1,000 Years. It's kind of an odd title, but if you read the book, it's just about how to create a better story and with his story as part of his life. So I would recommend that one. And my thought for the week is on leadership. And one of my favorite, I know I've shared this, one of my favorite leadership, I'll call it a manual, so to speak, is the book of Proverbs. I'm out of the Old Testament, and Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not turn from it." So there's so many things I think we can learn from that one. And maybe as a parent, you might say, train up a child over and over and over and over again in the way he or she should go, and he will not turn from it. But that's part of that training and leadership. So take that for what it's worth. So before we close this episode out, Darlene, any last words or anything you'd like to share before we finish this one up?
No, thank you so much for this opportunity. I appreciate it. It's very nice to meet you.
Oh, yeah.
Nice to be here.
Absolutely. Same to you.
Always happy to talk about Gaston Residential Services.
Well, again, I appreciate that. And we're very happy that you allowed the time. And it turned, last night, we were recording this on Wednesday, what's today? 22nd. Yeah, last night I was curious, I wonder if we were able to record this today, because we had a little snow and ice in part of the county, but actually where our office is, it doesn't even look like anything happened yesterday. No. It was very strange.
Beaufort got 9.5 inches.
Oh, wow. Oh, I bet that's beautiful down inches. There, some of those islands and the coast
desolate.
And out at, I guess it's Cape Lookout?
Yeah.
Is that right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we visited the lighthouse out there, so I bet that is a unique look right now. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, it might be a good time to go look at some of those webcams out there.
I was getting some pictures from my brother this morning.
Oh, yeah?
He still lives there,
okay, yeah, that's terrific. So, again, I appreciate you sharing that. But, yeah, I'm glad we were able to record today. So, to our listeners out there, thanks so much for taking time to listen to today's episode. Please continue to spread the word if you can about the podcast. And please don't hesitate to contact us here at our email address, which is podcast@gastonsgreat.com. We are always looking for suggestions for future podcast topics and guests. You can find the podcast and subscribe at the website, gastonsgreat.com, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. And please continue to follow us on all social media platforms as well. And give us a good 5-star rating. As Naomi reminds me, it gets us noticed. Thanks again to Darlene for being our guest today. Gaston's Great is produced and brought to you by Amy Anderson and Naomi Hunt from GSM Services. I'm your host, Stephen Long. Thanks again for hanging out with us, and please keep coming back to hear more reasons why Gaston's great.